Well, we've reached December and the end of the year, and with it comes the penultimate iteration of our GOTEI 13 series. I can't believe we've been doing it for as long as we actually have now. But each month we've taken a look at one of the divisions that helps to make up the military organisation central to Bleach, known as the GOTEI 13. And now, as we round out 2022, we'll be deep diving into a fun, interesting and, frankly, unhinged division with the scientific 12th Division. In many ways, the 12th Division completes our trio of highly popular, highly exposed divisions that come one after the other, following on from 10 and 11. But honestly, the 12th Division couldn't be any more different from those guys, and pretty much from the rest of the GOTEI 13, which is what makes them so interesting, so fascinating, and it's why I think they are a huge fan favourite part of the GOTEI 13 as well. And so, as we do every month, we'll be taking a detailed look at this specific division, doing an overview of the division itself before diving into its role in the story of Bleach. Here's a hint, this is another one that has a sizable role to play, though in many regards for slightly different reasons to the more exposed divisions that have come before it. In this instance, the 12th Division in many ways actually acts as plot drivers that help to push the story of Bleach forwards. And of course, we'll also be looking at some of the most prominent names and faces to show up within this division as well. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well to help support me and the channel. And if you want to take that support for me another step further, I do also have a Patreon as well. And I just want to say, as always, a massive shout out and a huge thank you to everyone supporting me over there on Patreon. I really do appreciate your support. And of course, as always with our GOTEI 13 series, we'll be covering this division throughout the entirety of Bleach, so there will be spoilers for the 1000-year Blood War arc and beyond in this video. So last month we looked at the fight-loving, thuggish 11th Division, probably, I would argue, the most popular division in Bleach, with the most amount of screen time. But honestly, the 12th Division I don't think can be too far behind, and it's certainly up there in the upper echelon of popularity, along with the 10th, along with the 6th Division as well. But much like, say, the 4th Division before them, the 12th couldn't be more different from that 11th Division that we looked at last month, although for a different reason entirely. Whereas the 4th Division are incredibly altruistic, they're incredibly selfless, and pretty much all they care about is serving and helping their fellow Shinigami, the 12th Division, at least to begin with in the story, is extremely self-absorbed. They basically only look inwards, despite being these pioneering innovators who should really be looking outward to the future of the entire GOTEI 13. At least to begin with, these are a bunch of incredibly insular, selfish, and frankly weird people who seemingly are only in it for themselves. But what's really awesome about the 12th Division is seeing them breaking out of that shell, predominantly in the form of their captain Mayuri Kurotsuchi, who honestly is something of a pariah towards the beginning of this series. He is so strange, so vulgar, so vicious, and frankly so evil. And as his character mellows out and changes and transforms and evolves as the series progresses, so too does the 12th Division in his wake. And so while the 11th Division is all about living in the moment, is all about only fighting using the blade, using physical strength, the 12th Division is the scientific division of the GOTEI 13, or at least have been ever since Kisuke Urahara took the helm, and since then he transformed the division, turning them into the innovators, into the inventors, creating the Shinigami Research and Development Institute that would become so fiercely intertwined with this division, much in the same way as other additional branches of the Soul Society have become entwined with other divisions in the past as well, like the Omnitsukido and the 2nd Division, for instance. Due to the overtly scientific nature of this division, they're often seen pushing the GOTEI 13 forwards, breaking boundaries and pioneering innovative technologies that have not only changed the way the Shinigami themselves do their jobs, but have also in some instances forged a path forwards for the actual story of Bleach itself. But what I've always liked about this division, especially early on, is that many of its members come across as dangerous intellectual individuals, people that aren't afraid, that don't shy away of the human cost of experimentation and progress. In fact, two of the division's most prominent members, their captain Mayuri Kurotsuchi and their current vice captain Akon, were both taken from the maggot's nest. They were both considered too dangerous to be allowed to live out normal lives within the rest of the Soul Society. They were taken from the maggot's nest and given positions of authority and power. To put it bluntly, these characters aren't afraid of engaging in the taboo to achieve the results that they desire. The old saying goes that knowledge is power, and that is absolutely the mantra the 12th Division chooses to live by. They know they're the smartest people in the room. In many ways, it feels like the 12th Division, and particularly the character of Mayuri Kurotsuchi, is Soul Society's kind of dirty little secret. They kind of let him get on with what he's doing, knowing it's extraordinarily unethical, but at the end of the day, it'll probably prove beneficial for the sake of the Soul Society. Interestingly, I think we can infer that the 12th Division hasn't always been this way, or at least we can assume as much anyway. It seems to take on this role really only after Kisuke is appointed captain, and then at that point, 110 years prior to the main storyline, he would create the Research and Development Institute and tie it intimately with the 12th Division. And so from that point onwards, their destiny is kind of sealed as the intelligent scientific division. Having said that, at the same time, the previous captain of the 12th Division before Kisuke Urahara, Kiryu Hikifune, who would later be promoted to the Squad Zero, was known specifically for inventing the G-Kongan, which of course completely revolutionized the work of the Shinigami. So it's possible, at least, there is some pioneering engineering pedigree there. Honestly, for a while, I feel like the 12th Division never really realized its true potential within the world and the lore of Bleach. As the scientific branch of a military organization, I always kind of feel like they could have been doing more within the actual story to aid the Soul Society itself, to really get themselves out there and feel the full force of this entire department that should have quite a lot of power, sway, and influence within the world of Soul Society. I mean, sure, they were called upon every so often, for example, to help build the fake Karakura town in preparation for the battle with Aizen and swap it out with the real one in cooperation with Urahara, but mostly, for the vast majority of the story of Bleach, it kind of just felt like they were the kooky, weird division with the captain who wore face paint and liked to experiment on people, and that was what helped them stand out. It's only really in the final arc, in the 1,000-Year Blood War, where the 12th Division really steps up. It's no coincidence that this goes hand in hand with Mayuri's development, with him becoming more altruistic and less selfish, and wanting to be a part of the bigger war effort, or at least seeming to be anyway. And so, in the final arc, that's when we really see them come into their own, I think. They become more than just that weird outlier division. They actively start contributing to the Soul Society in a big, much more visible way than they have been doing previously. A lot of the work they did previously was done kind of in the shadows. The ongoing battle against the Quincy Empire really gives them a chance to kind of just show the world, I think, why they are such a special division and why they are so integral to the GOTEI 13. Of course, when the Quincy proved to be an incredibly dangerous opponent that effectively steamrolls all the defences the Soul Society has, it's the 12th Division that steps up and counters them every step of the way. For example, when Mayuri deduces that the Quincy are using shadows to move around undetected, what does he do? He creates and builds an impenetrable stronghold of light, which would later be used as pretty much the last bastion of defence for the remaining GOTEI 13 soldiers. In the first invasion, Institute member Rin is the one who communicates directly with those fighting on the battlefield, letting them know that Ichigo is on his way. Akon is the one who takes it upon himself to set Ichigo free, even at risk to his own life, while Urahara, working with Mayuri, manages to develop a counter to the bankai stealing process and distributes them across the battlefield, effectively helping to save many of the captain's lives. More than ever, the 12th Division feels like the guys in the chair for the GOTEI 13, working non-stop from the beginning. So if we do an overview of the division now and take a look at some of the important players within the 12th Division, of all the divisions, I honestly feel like the 12th might be the one we get the most comprehensive look at. A big part of that is due to them playing the central role in Turn Back the Pendulum. Thanks to this, we get to see two almost completely different, yet also similar generations of the division, and thanks to that, we meet a lot of its important faces. Considering the overall prominence of the Research and Development Institute as well, particularly in the 1,000-Year Blood War, where they're kind of fighting on the front line in a different but just as vital way as the 11th Division, we also meet a lot of the less important faces as well. Of course, as of the Hell chapter, the division is currently headed up by its captain Mayuri Kurotsuchi and its vice captain Akon, who was promoted from the 3rd seat at the end of the Thousand Year Blood War. The previous vice captain is the now deceased Nemu Kurotsuchi, and the previous captain, as of 100 years ago, was of course none other than Kisuke Urahara, with his vice captain, the now turned Vizard Hiyori Sarugaki. And of course we can go even further than that. We know that the captain prior to Urahara was Kiryu Hikifune, and we also know of other characters that work within the R&D department itself, characters like Hyosu, Rin, and Kuna. We even see that after the battle against the Quincy, Mayuri has managed to recreate Nemu once again, this time known as Nemuri Hachigo. The 12th Division's insignia is the thistle, an incredibly tough and prickly flower, which feels important, which symbolises vengeance, strictness, and independence. And honestly, all 3 of these attributes feel like they suit the 12th Division down to a T, particularly that last one there, independence, which honestly feels like it sums up the character of Mayuri Kurotsuchi perfectly. We've seen this many times before in that he doesn't conform to the usual rules and regulations that many of the captains have to, such as even turning up to captains' meetings. If Mayuri's not interested in something, he simply won't bother to show up. Now, in some areas, the thistle is considered an invasive weed. It has negative connotations, for example, inconvenience, trouble, toughness, pain, and aggression. And again, these are all factors that I think can be attributed to the 12th Division. Many of its members seem to have undergone trials and tribulations themselves as they experiment continually upon their physical bodies in an effort to push themselves and their boundaries further. But the thistle is also often used in medicine, which I think is again a nice look at the flip side of the 12th Division about how they can kind of come round, lose that exterior prickliness, and be a massive benefit and help to the rest of the GOTEI 13 when they kind of feel like it. The most common colour of thistle is a royal noble shade of purple, much like what Mayuri enjoys adorning himself in, and this feels especially fitting as Mayuri is known to kind of see himself as being above the rest of the lowly Shinigami that he's forced to associate with. The 12th Division's official division colour is olive green, which symbolises space and wisdom and is overall a complex colour. But the more negative vibes associated with it are treachery and deceit, as well as greed and jealousy. Now, treachery and deceit don't seem to fit too well with this division, although they are of course deceived, and they are of course the victims of treachery in Turn Back the Pendulum, but greed and jealousy I think work perfectly with Mayuri himself, specifically that fantastic relationship he has with none other than his predecessor, Kisuke Urahara. Honestly, their relationship might be one of my favourites in the series, and I feel like I want to do a video looking at just that at some point in the future. Now, the 12th Division don't have any special duties per se, but ever since Kisuke Urahara, they have been deeply and intimately connected with the Research and Development Institute, which means they are now the ones developing the new technologies for the rest of the GOTEI 13 to use. Their barracks were also transformed to help accommodate scientific laboratories and equipment. So, as for the 12th Division's role in the overall story of Bleach, like I said earlier, it's another big one. These guys have an awful lot to do. But unlike, say, the 11th Division, who are mostly heavily involved because there is a lot of fighting in Bleach, and what do you know, the fighting division gets involved in a lot of fights, that's the main reason they have a lot to do in Bleach, but the 12th Division is a little different than that. Because they are the division of innovators, pioneers, and thinkers, more often than not, the plot is being driven by members of the 12th Division, specifically Kisuke Urahara, but also when you get to the 1000 Year Blood War arc, Mayuri is playing a constant and massive frontline role. Now, if we look at the 12th Division's timeline, 1000 years ago, and this I think is the first month I can do this, which is kind of annoying, I won't lie. I would have liked for the rest of these GOTEI 13 videos to have this included as well, but we know the very first captain of the 12th Division was a man called Uhin Zenjoji. Now, we have no idea who he is really, what he's all about, what he can do, what his personality is, or even really what the 12th Division was like under his command. There is absolutely nothing to say the 12th Division was even remotely scientific back 1,000 years ago. What we do know about Zenjoji is that he participated in that initial war against Yhwach and his Lichtreich Empire, but apart from that, that's basically it. Flash forwards a good 900 years or so, however, and we reach Turn Back the Pendulum, set 110 years prior to the main storyline, and this is really where the 12th Division already have a vital and vast role to play. After Hikifune is promoted right at the start of this arc, she is promoted to the 0 Division thanks to her invention of the Jikongan, which kind of makes me wonder when the Jikongan was invented, because it always seems to me like it's quite an integral part of a Shinigami's repertoire. So I do kind of wonder how long they weren't using Jikongan for, how recent an invention it actually is. There's obviously Project Spearhead and all that came out of it as well a little bit later on. But anyway, after being recommended by Yoroichi Shihoin, Urahara becomes the captain of the 12th Division, and he rapidly begins to change and adapt it to suit his liking, angering the current vice captain, Hiyori. But after beginning to transform the 12th Division into something more scientific, something more like a laboratory, Urahara takes Hiyori down to the Maggot's Nest. Not quite a prison, but for all intents and purposes a prison for people that haven't actually done anything wrong yet, but the Soul Society anticipates them being a danger to their fellow Shinigami in the future. Upon arriving at the Maggot's Nest, Urahara confronts their most dangerous inmate, Mayuri Kurotsuchi, and takes him under his wing, announcing his intention to create the Research and Development Institute, something unlike the Soul Society has ever seen before, dedicated to the creation of these forward-thinking technologies. 9 years on from that moment, we see that Kisuke Urahara has now invented a special type of Gigai designed to stabilize souls after hearing about several unexplained disappearances. Of course, all of this comes to a head when Kisuke Urahara discovers the truth of these disappearances as being holification experiments carried out by none other than the vice captain of the 5th Division, Sosuke Aizen. After that night goes extremely badly for Urahara, however, after Hiyori is holified against her will along with a number of other high-ranking Shinigami, Urahara is framed for these holification experiments and forced to flee the Soul Society along with his childhood friends Yoroichi and Tessai, as well as all of those Shinigami who would eventually become the Vizards. It's during this time, mere hours before his exile, that Kisuke reveals his invention known as the Hogyoku, which of course would come to play a massive role in the Arrancar Arc. And so, after the events of Turn Back the Pendulum, the 12th Division is left completely leaderless. Both Urahara and Hiyori are now gone from the Soul Society. Honestly, I know we kind of had to move on after the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, but I would have loved to have got an immediate aftermath of everything that happened there, seeing the captain's meeting presumably the very next day, now missing about half of their forces. It must have been a slightly awkward and potentially quite depressing gathering of those who yet remained. It's hard to tell exactly when Mayuri succeeded Urahara. I wonder if maybe the 12th Division was just left without a captain until somebody suitable came along. We know that Mayuri became a captain upon modifying his Zanpakuto to create himself a bankai using one of the failed versions of his Nemuri project. And then flash forwards again and we see Mayuri, now a captain, is present when Isshin Shiba delivers his report about a mysterious hollow he battled 20 years prior to the main story. We do get to see the Research and Development Institute very briefly when Rukia's Gigai is brought in, and we actually get to see characters like Akon and Hyosu, but that's really all they do. I honestly feel like this scene is mostly just here to emphasize what a group of oddballs these scientists in this division actually are. Once we get to the Soul Society arc, this is actually the first time we as readers get to see the 12th Division, get to see and understand the character of Mayuri Kurotsuchi, as well as his vice captain and daughter, Nemu. The Mayuri we see here is considerably more vicious and vile and downright depraved than he would be even an arc from now. This is a Mayuri who beats and abuses Nemu for the slightest little infraction. This is a Mayuri who actively uses her in battle against his opponents. This is a Mayuri who, presumably without their knowledge and certainly without their will, turns his own officers into human bombs just to try and get one up on the Ryoka invaders. To cut a long story short, the Soul Society arc gives us a Mayuri who is a true, reprehensible monster, an actual villain in the truest sense of the word, and from his defeat here against Uryu Ishida, Kubo would begin to slowly thaw Mayuri out a little bit, allow him to mellow out a bit more as the GOTEI 13 moves away from being the antagonists of the story to being the supporting protagonists, the actual heroes, the quote-unquote good guys. Mayuri kind of has to change a little bit to fit that mold. But in regards to the 12th Division in the Soul Society arc, we don't really see a huge amount of them outside of Mayuri and Nemu in his milestone battle against Uryu, which admittedly is easily one of my favourite fights from that arc. Of course, Mayuri and Nemu have a truly fascinating, if tragic, relationship and dynamic, the likes of which we had never seen before in the series, and really, in many ways, wouldn't see again, although now that I think about it, I feel like it was being reflected by Giselle and Bambietta, which is perhaps why they came up against Mayuri and Nemu. Kubo likes to be cyclical like that, so it makes a lot of sense. But all we really see of the 12th Division outside of the monstrous captain is several helpful officers who, like I said, meet an extremely grisly end, and Kubo goes to great lengths to hammer that home as well, even showing us the first-person perspective of that nameless soldier who seemingly had a life ahead of him, had dreams and ambitions, and it truly is body horror at its finest when we see his outstretched hand just warp and bubble and he just explodes, and that's the end of him as this grinning Mayuri just looks on. Mayuri and Nemu battle Uryu, but after Uryu activates the Let's Steal, he's able to overpower Mayuri and his bankai and technically win the fight as Mayuri does flee. But Uryu would have been killed by Mayuri's bankai's poison were it not for Nemu's compassion. Much later, after Mayuri has reformed himself and we get the only look we ever get of him with no makeup on, which is honestly really awesome, he's told about Aizen's betrayal and subsequent escape, to which he says he has no interest in it. Again, reaffirming just how selfish and self-absorbed this version of Mayuri was. Were this to be the Mayuri we see in the 1000-Year Blood War arc, being told of Aizen's deception and everything that's going on, I think he would have shown up on Sokyoku Hill with everybody else. When it comes to the Arrancar arc, the 12th Division doesn't have a massive amount to do here. In the Arrancar invasion portion of this story, Mayuri appears very briefly during a captain's meeting, but then when we get round to the Wako Mundo invasion, Mayuri is one of the 4 captains who invades the Hollow World in order to help rescue Ichigo and his friends. I feel like Mayuri probably jumped at the opportunity to go, not to rescue anybody, but because up until now, Wako Mundo had been this inaccessible treasure trove, as he calls it, of spoils that he is now free to investigate and experiment on. But Mayuri steps up anyway and saves Uryu and Renji from the 8th Espada Xyloporo Grands. Xyl is able to virtually kill Nemu during their fight, but Mayuri is able to use that to his advantage in order to defeat the Espada before resurrecting Nemu through questionable means. After the battle, he has Nemu dig up Xyloporo's hidden lab, wherein Mayuri discovers several hanging, shadowy corpses, the identities of which wouldn't be revealed for many, many years to come. But as the battle in Karakura begins, and Mayuri and the other captains are trapped, seemingly permanently, Mayuri then reveals the role the 12th Division played in preparing for the war to come, revealing that the 12th Division in fact created an entire replica of Karakura Town to replace with the real one. Now that I think about it, it's a pretty neat concept, the idea of the fake Karakura Town, but it also feels like a lot of needless busy work. I mean, the moment he shows up on the battlefield, Aizen claims to know this isn't the real Karakura Town, so why not just create any kind of plain old battlefield? As long as the pillars are there, it's still going to serve the same purpose of keeping the humans safe and keeping the real Karakura out of danger, and then you can use all that extra time you've gained on something slightly more productive. I honestly wonder if that was Mayuri's pride and vanity getting in the way there and giving them more unnecessary work to do. Like, imagine if Yamamoto was like, you know, just create a suitable battlefield, it doesn't have to be anything special. But Mayuri takes that as a challenge and he's like, no, the Research and Development Institute will accurately recreate every single building in Karakura Town. And then when it comes to the fake Karakura Town battle itself, of course, Ichigo is unable to reach the battlefield due to being locked in Wako Mundo, but Mayuri arrives having analysed how Garganta works from Xyloporo's lab, putting him in an extremely good mood. Mayuri then opens a Garganta to allow Ichigo and Urahara to travel to Karakura Town, but as he leaves, Ichigo remarks on how much Mayuri reminds him of Kisuke Urahara, and Mayuri is enraged by this, and again, that just kind of fuels that wonderful relationship, that dynamic, that rivalry they have, that second best mentality that Mayuri has towards Kisuke. It feels like a few characters have that mentality, as we just mentioned in our last video, the review of episode 11 of the Thousand Year Blood War, that Aizen seemingly felt the same way. But as Zaraki battles Yami, Byakuya and Mayuri kind of discuss the outcome of the war together, and Mayuri seemingly implies that he has faith that Ichigo can win it. I feel like Kubo did a good job with Mayuri on the whole. It was a delicate balance for sure, humanizing this character while trying to keep those eccentricities that made him so popular and unique in the first place. In regards to the rest of the 12th Division, again, they don't really do all that much here. They play a very much fringe role, but they are absolutely not the workhorses that we would see in the final arc. I think at the very beginning of the arc, Hyosu tells Akon that Espada-level threats have been detected appearing in Karakura Town, and that's really about all they do. It seems like for the most part they play a very behind-the-scenes role here, and I think that's indicative of a couple of things, of the fact that this doesn't really feel like a full-scale war like the Thousand Year Blood War would, but also of the fact that Aizen and his Arrancar army never really get anywhere close to the Soul Society, and so those who work predominantly in the Soul Society can remain fairly cushy. That, of course, all changes in the final arc when the Soul Society is the real, true focus of basically the entire war, and it forces the 12th Division to do a little more than just sit around behind monitors. But once the war is over, Mayuri prepares to transfer Karakura back before he begins doing regular research in Hueco Mundo now that it's more easily accessible. When it comes to the Lost Agent arc, this is another instance of Mayuri showcasing his independence, and again the fact that he doesn't really care about a lot of the goings-on in the Soul Society. Ichigo, of course, returns after having regained his Shinigami powers, but Mayuri is one of only 2 captains. Ukitake doesn't show up because he's under the weather. Mayuri just doesn't show up to greet Ichigo because he can't be bothered, and he doesn't think it's of any interest. And you know what, I like this. While it is obvious that Kubo is changing not just Mayuri but the 12th Division on the whole, I like that he keeps some of their more recognisable traits. But then of course we get to the 1000-Year Blood War arc, the 12th Division's crowning moment in this story as far as I'm concerned. As we've seen throughout this timeline, they have had to basically wait almost the entire of the story to get it, but boy, do they get it, and they really come across extremely well, I think, in this final battle against the Quincy. Now, I've done several videos on Mayuri and the 12th Division in the 1000-Year Blood War arc already, ranging from the morality of letting Mayuri live in that arc, to looking at how he was absolutely the MVP of the GOTEI 13, to even an in-depth look at his battle against Pernida Pankajaz along with Nemu. But safe to say, this is a big arc, not just for him, but for those characters surrounding him in his division as well. In the first invasion, the Quincy bring the fight right to the streets of Seirete, meaning immediately the 12th Division has to get involved in a way they have never done before. Mayuri is busy analysing these bankai stealing medallions, but he's too late to prevent several captains from losing theirs anyway. Meanwhile, the Research and Development Institute itself is actively trying to coordinate the battlefield. They're trying to get messages, desperate communication out to those currently engaged with invaders in the Seirete itself. As I mentioned, Rin is the one who lets everyone know that Ichigo is coming, while Akon is the one who tries to monitor Ichigo's progress. But the department itself comes under attack by a mind-controlled Jidanbo, and for the first time ever, really, we get to see the 12th Division in a truly dire situation. Characters like Hyosu attempting to fend off these enemies, as even his own men, for some reason, are turned against him. It's really dramatic and really good stuff, and it's probably, I would say, the most effective way of humanizing these characters. Akon and Hyosu do manage to escape, and Akon later puts everything on the line, not only to contact Ichigo in the first place, but also to then try and free him once he's been trapped inside the Garganta, even with him being attacked from behind by the Sturmritter Shaz Domino, who is throwing daggers into Akon's back. Honestly, this whole sequence within the first invasion gave me a ton of respect for the character of Akon. It's basically what made him one of my favourite vice captains in the series. After the first invasion, Mayuri delivers us some of the biggest revelations in this part of the story, explaining how Ichigo's broken bankai can't be fixed, and therefore paving the way for the next part of the plot. He then later holes himself up in his laboratory as Akon attempts to spy on him. He is working on several strange projects, later revealed to be presumably his Kurotsuchi corpse unit, but also the revival of Izuru Kira. And if the Research and Development Institute thought they had it bad in the first invasion, when the second invasion begins, the entire department totally disappears. We get to see the monitor, the controls, vanish underneath Hyosu's own hand, which obviously terrifies them all. They're then confronted by the Sturmritter Askin Naklavar, but Mayuri arrives, revealing his new Quincy-proof lab and outfit, dressing rather fittingly as a sun and giving off this incredible incandescent light. But although Askin antagonizes Mayuri briefly, he eventually leaves without causing any further trouble, allowing the Research and Development Department to focus on the war effort. As the battle rages, Mayuri and the division monitor the progress from inside their lab, which acts as almost a central hub for the entirety of the GOTEI 13, which is just one of the many parts of the Thousand Year Blood War that I absolutely love, that makes it inherently feel more like a war than anything in the series that has come before it. They sense that both Hitsugaya and Soifon have fallen, but Urahara arrives at the last minute and works in cooperation with Mayuri and the division to distribute his new Shineyaku pills that he has developed, helping the captains turn the tide against the Quincy. A fair bit later, once Yhwach Arc has escaped to the royal palace and we kind of enter the second half of the second invasion, Mayuri and Nemu rescue Ikkaku and Yumachika from the Sturmritter Giselle duel. Mayuri battles Giselle and her zombified Bambietta, as well as later on a zombified Hitsugaya, who Mayuri duels one-on-one, which is really cool to see. Mayuri finally reveals the identities of those bodies in the laboratory to be fallen Privarone Espada and other Espada and Fraction level Arrancar, and uses them to not only defeat Giselle, but steal her own zombies from her to add to his ever-growing Kurotsuchi corpse unit. After this, Mayuri moves on to help Byakuya against Sturmritter El Pepe Wakabrada, using his zombies to save the day there as well. Once the situation has become incredibly dire, Mayuri returns to his lab, which is now being used as this last-ditch stronghold, this headquarters for the remaining Shinigami. The Soul King is dead, Ukitake has briefly taken his place, and Mayuri helps them all build a gateway to the palace before they're interrupted by the Quincy. Eventually, both Mayuri and Nemu make it to the royal palace, where they rescue Kenpachi Zaraki from near death against the Sturmritter Pernida Pankajaz before taking on the left arm of the Soul King. The battle is long and brutal, and Nemu is killed despite showing numerous signs of advancement and evolution within her personality and her own free will. But Mayuri is able to finish off the Sturmritter, rescuing Nemu's brain before falling into a coma. At the same time as this fight is going on against Pernida Pankajaz, we get a little bit of insight into what's going on with the 12th Division back down below. Akon reveals that they are kind of preparing everything for a safe return for those fighting above, while Kuna discovers the remains of the previous iterations of the Nemuri project. After the war, Mayuri has created this brand new version of Nemu using her brain as a basis, Nemuri Hachigo, and Akon is now his vice captain. Akon detects Yhwach Arc's resurgent Reiatsu 10 years after the battle ended, and Mayuri is one of the captains to witness its final defeat as Kazui Kurosaki destroys it in the human world. And then of course we've got the Hell chapter. The 12th Division plays a decent role here as well, for as short as it is. Before Ukitake's ceremony, it's Mayuri who uses a hologram of himself to deliver a message to each of the different squads to their vice captains, letting them know to go and gather in Karakura Town. There are some nice funny moments here, including the fact that he's somehow able to blast lasers out of his hologram, specifically at Shuhei Hisagi and nobody else, which is really nice to see, and of course Mayuri is sporting a brand new look here as well. Meanwhile, Akon, now the vice captain, is battling Hell Hollows in the human world. We get to see him utilising these strange potions, these vials of what appear to be acid, in conjunction with an incantation that has something to do with the game Mahjong. And that's pretty much it for our overview of the 12th Division. Like I said, they're a fun division, they're a strange one, but I really do appreciate how intimately involved they are with the Bleach storyline, particularly later on. But even around Turn Back the Pendulum, they are of critical importance. There are a ton of major important characters featured throughout the 12th Division, and honestly they are easily one of my favourites among the GOTEI 13. But that's it guys, let me know in the comments below what you think of the 12th Division, who is your favourite character from the 12th Division, and what is your favourite 12th Division moment in Bleach. That's it for me now before Christmas. I hope each and every one of you has an amazing and safe Christmas. Have a wonderful time. If you don't celebrate it, I hope you still have just an amazing holiday period regardless. Thank you all for the incredible support you have shown me once again this year. I really, truly appreciate it. And yeah, until next time, make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already, and until then, I'll catch you later. And I'll see you then.